Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Pro Dev Lab podcast. My name is Dave Deese, and I am your host for this podcast. Today, I'd like to share with you a recording I did previously for an online webinar, and the title is Imposter Syndrome at Work. So I hope you enjoy this, and please feel free to share or comment. Let me know what you think, because I want to make these better for you. So any feedback you can supply would be appreciated so that these get better and better every time for you. So again, this is Imposter Syndrome at Work. Please enjoy this podcast. Thanks. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Imposter Syndrome at Work. What we're going to talk about is what is imposter syndrome. And give it a description, make sure everybody kind of understands what we're talking about. And we're going to kind of focus on how it affects you at work. I'm going to give you a couple of examples of how I've experienced it, and to make sure I'm telling my story and have an example of what it is that we're talking about and how it affects your work. And then we're going to talk about how to deal with it. So as it says in the description, how we can actually use the acknowledgement of this to our advantage. So we're going to talk about that. The Oxford Dictionary, or Oxford Languages definition of imposter syndrome. It's the persistent inability to believe that one's success is deserved or has been legitimately achieved as a result of one's own efforts or skills. So what that means is that we're doing our work, we've got a job, and we actually think that we're not qualified to do the job. Who am I to be doing this? Who am I to be training on these topics, right? Would be an example of that. That's basically the idea, right? It's persistent. We don't believe that we got here on our own. We only got this job because of somebody else or by pure luck. We don't really deserve to be here. And there's some really downsides to that. Let's talk about that. And the first thing I want to do is give you a couple of examples that I've experienced. The first one is in my past life, if you will, or my past jobs, I'm a professional musician, singer, songwriter, and poet. And three of my friends that I was in a band with. So that's Mike, Mark, and Brian. And I admired their musicianship so much. And sometimes it's like, wow, do I really belong? Am I equal to these folks? Am I really as good as these guys? It's like, there's no way I'm as good. And then I realized that I kind of dove into it a little bit and thinking about it a little bit more. And then I wrote and recorded my own wedding song. So the song my wife and I danced to at our wedding, I wrote it and my band recorded it. So we recorded it in Bluebird Studio in Carlisle, Massachusetts. I don't think they're around anymore. I actually sang the song in the microphone that Roy Orbison sang his last album in. So again, it's like really big stuff. It's like, do I really deserve to be here? Okay, and then I learned I was. And then I even published a book of poetry. So yeah, at first it's like, do I really deserve to be here? Another example would be I received a job, or I should say I got a job at a company called Hill Associates. Now, Hill Associates is a company that telecom in the telecom to the telecom carriers. So they were the trainers of the telecom industry, and they taught everything from dial tone to the internet. And once I got the job there, and I really loved it, it was great, worked with a lot of great people, I realized that I learned shortly after that the person who started the company, the late Dave Hill, has PhD in mathematics, and he was actually one of the deans of the school at University of Vermont. And I reported to another person who was a PhD in computer sciences. So it's like all these folks have their PhDs, and I was a tech school grad. I went to technical high school because I needed to get out of my house and get a job. And I took that in electronics or electromechanical technology, a place called Shawsheen Tech in Billerica, Massachusetts, if anybody knows about that school. they never made me feel less. It was really me. So this imposter syndrome is the point is that it's something that we do to ourselves. It's not anything that somebody is putting on us. We're doing this. This imposter syndrome is something we feel and we put upon ourselves. Because these folks that I work with never made me feel anything less. And so much so that I actually was promoted to what was known as an SMTS, okay, which means Senior Member of Technical Staff. So I was right there with everybody. Again, they never made me feel like this imposter syndrome is something we put on ourselves. And then lately, it kind of creeped in this lately where this something known as the ATD's Handbook for Consultants, which talks all about if you want to be a training consultant, how do you go about doing that? And how do you take a consultant's view at training? And I was like, I don't deserve to be in this book. Elaine Beck is like the large personality and the big person editor and author in ATD. She's got over 40 books published through them on training and consultancy. And who am I? Well, who am I is I had a sidebar entry in this book. So there's many chapters, and I wrote a sidebar. Sidebar is those sections in a book, especially a technical book. If you see, there's usually like a gray space within the book that kind of is like a side story. It's known as a sidebar. And I wrote a couple of them, and one was accepted. The cool thing is I was actually asked by Elaine to contribute to this. And I was one of 40 trainers asked to contribute. And to put some perspective into that, ATD is a membership of trainers. It stands for the Association for Talent Development, of over 12,000 trainers worldwide. And I was one of them that's actually in this book. So again, Elaine wasn't responsible for making me feel small. On the contrary, she made me feel big because she asked me to contribute to this book, and now it's in this book. So again, that imposter syndrome is something we put on ourselves. Okay. So how can that affect your work and your workplace? Well, you have a fear of failing the team. If you're always going around thinking I'm not good enough, that I'm to be working in here, and so on. Setting impossible standards. It happens that you get put so much pressure on yourself that the standards you set on yourself are just not reasonable. Nobody can meet those standards, never mind you or yourself. It creates low self-esteem, or, it usually comes from the idea that we have low self-esteem. If we aren't secure about ourselves, and we have this intense fear of failure, right? Like, what if somebody finds out I'm a phony? Is what some people I've heard say that I've helped with, that I hear say, the intense fear of failure. And then perfectionism. Being a perfectionist is never a good thing, or I shouldn't say never, but usually not a good thing. We may want perfection in the job, but it's something you strive for. It's not something you can get to. And the downside to doing that is it can make the job really impossible to reach. Okay. And the biggest effect of this is it can create a horrible place to work. Okay. How do you deal with it? Well, we focus on facts. As I mentioned in the earlier ones, right? When I was in the band, my friend Mike, he played bass and guitar. In the middle is my brother Mark. He played drums and sang. And then my friend Brian, they asked me to join the band. And so, it wasn't those are the facts. It wasn't me saying, oh, I can't really sing. Oh, I'm not as good as you guys. The facts are they thought I was equal to them. The people at Hill Associates never because, oh, you don't have a PhD. Well, you don't belong here. On the contrary, it's like you belong here because you're talented. I knew what I was doing. I was creative. So focus on the facts, accept compliments. If somebody tells you you're doing a great job, say thank you. Sometimes it's really hard for some people. I know a lot of people that I work with, that I have in my family, then you give them a compliment and says, oh, yeah, right, I'm not that good. Say thank you. Start to accept compliments. That's going to go a long way in you dealing with imposter syndrome. Share how you feel or what you're feeling in safe spaces, be that through a therapist or a coach. A lot of people like to have workplace coaches. I love coaching people in the workplace for these professional development type skills. But share people, tell people, find somebody, what maybe it's a partner that you trust to say, I'm really feeling like I don't belong in this job. Find those safe places and share that. Know you deserve where you are. Know that you are there because you're there. I one of my favorite things I learned was when I was starting to feel this imposter syndrome a long time ago. I was working at a company and I was talking to my coach, Dr. James Smith Jr. And I said, I feel like they want me to leave because I feel all this pressure and I'm putting all this pressure on myself. And he said, Dave, if they want you to leave, they would tell you to leave. And I thought, you're right. That's a really good point. They didn't want me to leave. They really enjoyed my work. It was me in this. So know that I deserve to be there. So you should know. So focus on your facts, accept compliments, just say thank you. It's really hard to start with. Don't go any further than when someone gives you a compliment, just say thank you. Even if you start trying to explain away, just say, oops, stop, oops, sorry, thank you. I appreciate it. Share how you feel. If you're feeling imposter syndrome, you have maybe a safe manager or colleague or coach or partner or just a friend. Share that. Know you deserve where you are. And another thing is to cultivate self-compassion. This is something that we can use in our personal life, but it's also important to use at work, right? One affects the other. Cultivate that self-compassion. Be compassionate with yourself. Use that self-empathy into your own life, into your own being. Saying, I'm feeling insecure right now, but I know I'm doing good work. I'm getting good feedback, or I deserve this raise that I got, or I deserve the recognition, I got the title, or whatever it might be. So really learn to cultivate that self-compassion, right? Talk more to yourself, and really spend some time thinking about how good you really are and that you deserve being where you are. So that was imposter syndrome at work. Again, my name is Dave. Thanks for being here.